what we do is that we tell us further, like in this case where we are asking about trust, we ask you whether you wanted to improve the level of trust among employees. Now notice, this is basically what? This is a hygiene preference. Hi, hello and welcome to part 2 of the culture measurement framework. We have discussed the AISI framework in part 1 and I'm going to leave a link right at the top to go and visit part 1 if you haven't already seen it. And for the great ones who have been supporting us and have seen part 1 and now come to part 2, thank you a lot. And we discuss the framework basically. So today we'll discuss the measurement practices. So when we talk of the framework, and as I had hinted upon in my last session on Richard Barrett's culture survey, which basically looks at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what you'll see is, as we know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is based on the 5 points of survival, security, belonging, importance, and self-actualization, where the top 3 are known to be the pro habits or the applications of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and hence the culture survey is a lot in engagement, which means that if you are trying to measure engagement levels, I would definitely suggest to go for a culture survey like that, or use the Maslow's hierarchy to basically predict and find where does the team lie, and hence build your policies and your engagement practices thereof. However, if you're trying to find out about culture and hence determine or align culture to your strategic initiatives, then I believe you need to look beyond looking at Maslow. Why? Because my own interpretation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as you can see here, is that I have, instead of the 5 levels, I have squeezed it down to 4 levels, saying that okay, you have the survival needs, then you have the social recognition, then you have the individuality, and finally the happiness. I hope you are all aware of Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, where he says that happiness or eudaimonia is the final achievement. There's nothing beyond that. So what happens is basically, so you have a set of expectations of going up the ladder in Maslow's, but there has to be a set of motivation which will push you for that. So just like if you have basic needs, you need to basically manage your expectations, right? So which means that if you're right at the bottom of the slab, probably you'll do better by being much more adherent to exactly what your expectations are. Similarly, if you move it to the next level, which is where you have completed your basic requirements and now moved into your need for social recognition, then probably if you can manage your emotions better, if you can manage your feelings better, if you are much more calmer, that's where you'll do better in managing the. And in the 3rd level, where you want to assert your individuality, you would need a lot of intelligence, right? And hence, finally, to achieve happiness, you need to have self-actualization based motivation. So that's my outlook of how I see basically motivation and the hierarchy of needs playing out. In fact, I've written about it in my book, Reasoning of Choices. You can go through it. So what we'll see is that If you want to understand just purely motivation and not look at culture, you can of course go to Pexer test and take one of our tests, which in fact we have the motivational test, which basically divides motivation into 5 levels, and we have used that part of the framework even here to say that if you look at motivation, so right from the scale of intrinsic to extrinsic, as you move, you'll see you are moving from autonomy to competence to purpose to success and finally to social driven behavior. This could also be looked at from the perspective of individual versus group, which means that as you move towards success and social, you're moving more towards group behavior. You are adapting more towards what can be called as social successes behavior versus individual or personally motivated engagements, which could be entrepreneurship, which could be research, which could be trying to do your own thing, create your new thing. So what we do is across the 4 parameters or the 4 pillars of extrinsic versus intrinsic and hygiene versus motivation, what you'll see is be able to find what exactly motivates the employee so that you can do a better assignment of role for them, or probably if you're looking at reallocating roles, this could be a great tool. Right? So when we do the culture survey or try to define the framework for your organization, we always suggest to look at it from the job role mandate. So as you can see here, it's not necessarily that all job roles will look like this or at this level of measure. There could be differences, which means it could be whether it is higher autonomy based or more schedule based, whether there's a high level of competency or there's a high level of hard skills, getting stuff done, whether there's a higher purpose or there's more situational job roles. As we know that the more higher you go up the corporate or organizational hierarchy, you'll find more purpose-driven job roles. Similarly, whether the role demands a high amount of success, like say for example in a sales role versus a high amount of effort, which could be say in manufacturing or in research. And finally, whether the role is more social or individual, and the best example is of course of human resources, where the role needs to be more social compared to an individual, which could be say an accounts or a finance role. So now that we have understood that departments or individuals need to have a certain level of motivation pre-built within them, what we can see is that whether that motivation then aligns with the org objectives. So as you know that the organization objectives begin with the strategic objectives, but right at the bottom lies whether the organization first of all is extrinsically motivated or intrinsically motivated. Organization which is B2C would obviously be much more extrinsically motivated, for example Amazon or Starbucks. Now if you look at another organization like Intel, it would be more intrinsically motivated, or IBM, where a huge population is more dedicated towards research and bringing out new products, and hence they do not have, or the bulk of the organization is not client facing, right? So that's the first definement that we often fail to do, and this becomes important. Once we have done that, then determining the competencies in terms of capability, cognition and curiosity becomes important, and that's where your hiring benchmarks come into play. Now once you have determined your competencies, you can then define your result areas, your key performance indicators, and hence align them back to your strategic objectives, right? Does that make sense? Great. So as you can see now within every job role, or within at least a departmental level, or at a locational level, or at a business level, one can determine the right amount of action, intellect, social and influencer mixes that would be required, and it would also differ of course across hierarchies. The higher one is across the hierarchy, even at the business level or at the department level, the higher would be the need for capability to influence or the capability of intellect, right? So also with social or roles which have much more extrinsically driven results would need to have much more social approach, and roles like, say for example, manufacturing or any kind of back-end roles like finance, operations would have much more action driven, which means have predetermined outcomes to be delivered at clear schedules, right? So now that we have understood that that's how we can map both individuals and departments, right, through the interplay of hierarchy and levels, and look at the IC framework on top of it to determine exactly what should be the organizations, and hence now when we test it we could find out exactly what are the levels expected by the businesses, by the key stakeholders versus what are the current levels, and hence make improvements to see that the culture gets aligned. Of course, as I said, it's all driven by values, and when it is driven by values, it's important that there is either the hiring practice, which is alignment of hiring towards the particular values required as per the cultural matrix and framework of the department or business, or of course reinforcement of values through rewards, recognition and interventional trainings. Now how do we do it? This is very personalized, and yet I'm trying to give you a glimpse of it. So imagine that you want to check trust. So what we do is we not only suggest you that when you're looking at trust, are you looking at it as a point of action, as a point of intellect, as a point of improving sociability, or as a factor of influence within the organization, right? So the first things first, we tell you to choose the top 5 values you feel are required, and then you select why do you require it. Do you think that there's a lack of action, or there's a lack of intellect, there's a lack of social, or there's a lack of influence? And then what you do is that you tell us further, like in this case where we're asking about trust, we ask you whether you wanted to improve the level of trust among employees. Now notice, this is basically what? This is a hygiene preference, right? So when you're saying that you want it to improve the level of trust among employees, you're talking of your preference for trust to be higher as a hygiene factor, right? And hence to be built within the culture of the organization. Now imagine if 60-70% of the employees are talking about this and in this manner, which means that you really need to work on the factor of trust coming in your daily operations. There's a lack of conformity towards trust. However, if someone chooses to say that no, I'm not concerned about that, I believe that I trust my colleagues enough, but I am looking at trust to enable delivering the best outcome based on personal judgment, which means the person is trying to hint that they believe that if they are trusted more, they would deliver higher results. How often have you seen people say, leave it to me, I'm here, I'll manage it? They are not only talking of confidence, they are talking of adding a bit more, or as we say, a pinch of trust to the relationship. When we do that, what we do is we add our own value system, saying that I would put in my part of the effort if I am trusted enough, right? And not have someone who is closely micromanaging, right? Which means if you find again a bigger chunk of employees talking about being micromanaged, you would of course need to correct that, which means that there is some kind of working you need to do, not for the employee but probably for the reporting managers. Of course, if your results, your performance results are saying that no, if you leave the management to their trust, you will actually have more revenue losses looking at what they have been doing, and there's been enough, then you would like to do something vice versa. So that's the whole approach. And then of course we will sit with you and discuss the report, and in fact we always look at providing both an individual and management report to basically understand both at the individual level what are the corrections required vis-a-vis what are the corrections required as far as the organization, the broad departments, and of course if we can find certain kind of insights coming in from particular locations or from particular segments or demographic clusters, like say from example from a set of people who could belong to a certain gender or a certain age group. We have often found that giving absolutely new insights to the management which they might have not even thought of earlier. With this, I would like to invite your comments, your suggestions, and also connect with me and let me know your views of the AISI framework, and if you would like to engage us to put it at your workplace. I would end here. Have a nice day.